Monday, May 23rd, 7:44 p.m. This is now my, I think, third attempt at trying to make this video. Sorry if you were in the middle of watching the first one I put up. I pulled it down because I noticed everything was out of order. Um, so anyway, I there's so much going on right now. So we have Davos meeting. By the way, there's some weird planetary stuff going on this week. Conjunctions, Mars, success in war kind of stuff again. Devil horn moons. I don't even know. I can't even keep up, honestly. Things are coming so fast. So we have Davos meeting about how they're going to save us all and be the saviors of the problems they created. Then we have WHO meeting to decide how they're going to take over the world with their evil medical tyranny. We have war popping off everywhere, China gearing up for war. We have weird stuff going on in Ukraine and Russia still, with rumors that NATO possibly entered Ukraine. We have the worst economic collapse, I think, since 1923. We have inflation. We have monkeypox. Can't forget the monkeys. So, anyway, just take your pick of anything you want that's going on right now. And obviously, we know it's going to get bad. Unfortunately, that's just the time we live in, but not unfortunately, because where there is great adversity, there's also opportunities for great heroism and great sainthood, right? So I had a weird dream. I've had a series of weird dreams, but one of these weird dreams involved a flag that I had never seen and it was right before I woke up, and it was just kind of a blurry dream, but there was this flag that stuck in my memory, and it was planted on the ground, and I was like questioning it kind of in my mind, and the answer I had when I woke up was new Christianity, or I think it was renewed Christianity. And I'm like, that's the weirdest thing ever. I had no idea what I was supposed to be making of it. I didn't even really think about it as probably as hard as I should have. And here's the thing, I think God speaks to us in the ways that we understand best. He uses our gifts to our advantage in dialoguing with him. So for me, I have this kind of investigative type personality, and so he leaves me these weird breadcrumbs, and that's kind of how we communicate. It's strange. That's our relationship. So I never, some people have these great visions and stuff like that. I get like bits and pieces, and then I got to put the puzzle together, sort of thing. So that's kind of what I'm doing with this dream that I had. So I was reading a Marie Julie Jahenny quote today, and I don't even know why I was doing this. I don't even remember what my train of thought was at the time, but I had came across something about that resembled the flag. And I think it was in relation to maybe Joan of Arc. So my patron saint is Saint Joan of Arc. If you've been following that channel, you know that. So I'm a big believer in her role going into the period we're going into, her intercession, I should say, because when she was alive, part of her mission was to restore proper authority in France. And so I think she is my patron saint. So anyway, um, so I came across this thing that kind of like the flag, and I'm like, oh man, I dreamt of a French monarchy flag. And I'm so clueless about French history. Like I try my best, and really where I learned everything was those French monarch prophecies and just researching Joan of Arc and all kinds of stuff. But at school, I don't think I learned any of this stuff ever. It's like a whole new world for me, this French history. And eventually, I do need to do a video on the Sacred Heart prophecies about consecrating France to the Sacred Heart and how that wasn't done and everything, because that's super important as well. But anyway, so the flag I saw looked like this, only it was a little bit lighter blue. I don't remember what the words said, but I know it was just a solid white background, this sort of thing. There might have been something like animals on it. I don't remember. It was blurry, but King Charles, the one who St. Joan did help crown, bring that to fulfillment. I think his had animals on the side, so it could go either way. But this is the one I first came across. So this is the one I'm going with in the message that I'm supposed to be getting here. If you know anything, please help me out, because this is not one of my strong subjects. History is not a strong subject of mine, believe it or not. And I kind of learn as I go. So if my viewers are so smart and knowledgeable, if you know anything about this other than what I'm going to talk about, please email me, joanavarkmedia@gmail.com, or drop a comment below. So this was kind of the first thing I came across, and it said French Catholic royalist flag, flown by the true Catholics who fought the Masonic French revolutionaries. And so I'm like, oh, okay, this totally makes sense now. Now I get it. I'm like, oh, like I just did these videos on Masonry. I'm always praying against Masonry. I just like, so now I'm like understanding where we're at, and how Masonry may have defeated the French Catholic royalists in France in the 1790s, but they are not going to ultimately succeed. And so this is a message of hope in the midst of chaos and just all kinds of atrocities. This was really a dream of hope, and it was a gift, and I'm so appreciative for it. And so this is by this website, or this Yves Dupont, who writes that Catholic prophecy book. Now, from what I understand, there might be some iffy things in that book, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And so I want to read this. Why is my computer doing weird things? Anyway, many of these prophecies are French, and they make it quite clear that monarchy will be restored in France, but the restoration of monarchy will not be a local affair. It will be a worldwide phenomenon. This will mark a near historical epoch, and because of this, many people are finding it hard to believe the age of republics and democracies will be over. Communism and socialism a thing of the past. The age of peace will also be an age of belief and an age of plenty. It will mark the victory of the Immaculate Heart of Mary and of Christ the King. And I know people say this is a Eucharistic reign, and I believe that's accurate, but I also believe it's a social. Christ the King as the King of the social natural order as well. The re-valuation of authority and discipline in the conversion of the entire world to the Catholic faith, except for a few pockets of unbelief. So that's what I'm going to say about this. But so then obviously I had to figure out, I've never heard of this French Catholic royalist flag. So I had to figure out what exactly this meant. And what I came across was, so the colors that I saw looked more like this. And it's connected with Louis the 16th, 17th, and I think the 18th maybe. It's connected with the Louis. It says, this one says, the one they actually used, I believe, or at least in the first part of the uprising, said, Vive le Roi, which is long live the king, and then Army Catholique Royal, which is the Catholic Royal Army. And I had no idea this stuff existed, honestly. I'm oblivious like to this kind of stuff. So you can imagine. Um, all right, so what is it? Oh shoot, I lost one of the. Oh man, hold on, hold up. Mad. Here it is. Nope. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. Like I said, I've been trying to make this video. I was trying to feed my kids. No. Um, he talks about a specific. I guess I don't really need to find it, but he talks about how like these people were heroes. So if you type in most of the sites, so what I came to find out is it's linked. That flag is specifically linked to the uprisings in the Vendier. And so if you Vendier uprising, everything about it on Google is like horrible. Like they were insurgents, um they were massacred, but like they call them insurgents and terrorists in most of the stuff I read. But they were Catholics who didn't want. This is what happened. I'm going to read it from this because this is probably the best one I found. So they lasted from 1793 to 1799. The history of the Vendee Wars was not written by the victors. It was completely written out of French history and until recently denied by the French government. It is still not part of the school history curriculum, but it is well documented. When Solzhenitsyn opened the official Vendier Memorial at Les Luxembourg in 1993, the event was ignored by central government as well as by most of the mainstream French media. The war was the first total war in modern history in which men, women, and children were involved. It was truly a populist movement. It was also the first modern war in which regular troops were repeatedly beaten by mainly unarmed, no firearms peasants. It was a savage affair in which each side were guilty of atrocities. The name of the region at that time was Basse-Poitiers and was a poor rural region. As well as peasants, it was inhabited by impoverished aristocrats, petit bourgeois, I forget how to say that word, and poor priests. So the social inequalities were less marked here than elsewhere in France. The Revolution of 1789 was at first full of hope with a genuine wish for reform. Even the English hailed it as a triumph of reason over superstition and privilege. And they're talking about the overthrowing of the monarchs by the Masons in favor of a republic and a democracy. That summer, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen was adopted by the National Assembly. Okay. The more the Jacobins took control in Paris, the more events began to escalate. No political or state organization can control the religious faith of its people, and the population of the Vendee militiaire, the name given to the area of armed resistance south of Loire in Brittany, was devoutly Catholic. However, controlling faith was exactly what the Republican government tried to do. And you always hear about the Enlightenment being this beautiful Renaissance movement and all this peace and artwork and all this stuff, but it was brutal. Like, they gained power in a brutal way. And so this is really like what I guess I'm supposed to be pointing out. I don't know. But anyway. So in 1790, local government was abolished, followed by what was considered blow to poor Catholics, the vote on 12th July for the civil constitution of the clergy. This was state control of their church, okay? So this was like communism, state control of their church with the confiscation of its property. Their traditional priests were banned and all religious orders suppressed. In 1791, the ecclesiastical oath forced priests under state rather than the episcopal control. Those who refused, and in the Vendee, most refused, were outlawed and replaced by state priests. 1792 saw an increase in taxes, and in January 1793, the execution of the king. Then the introduction of conscription in February caused great opposition. Although there had been sporadic riots and easily suppressed uprisings since 1792, the final spark that ignited the smoldering resentment into a barbaric war was the prohibition of public worship and the closing of all Catholic churches on 3rd March 1793. Well, things you don't learn about in the public school system, huh? This caused no inconvenience to the nobles who had their own private chapels in their homes, as well as their own personal priests. However, without access to churches, the ordinary devout Catholic could not fulfill their religious obligations. In response, the ordinary people of the Vendier militare defied conscription. Paris ordered Republican troops and National Guards to enforce conscription by ballot. On 11th March, Republican soldiers billeted at Machaisol were massacred. That same day, the people of St. Florent-le-Vieille turned their horizontal scythe blades into very effective vertical weapons and routed the government troops who were supported by cannons. Despite sustaining heavy casualties, the villagers kept advancing until the soldiers' nerve broke, as did their ranks, and they fled. The Vendee Wars had begun. There were uprisings in several parts of France, but they only lasted a few weeks. Only in the Vendier in Brittany was there prolonged insurrection, with the Chouans waging a predominantly guerrilla war. The Vendeans invited local nobles with military experience to lead them, and although some refused, others willingly agreed. When asked by his local men to lead them, the 20-year-old La Roche Jacqueline spoke the immortal words, "I will show myself worthy. If I advance, follow me. If I flinch, cut me down. If I fall, avenge me." The uprising was so spontaneous and popular that within a few weeks the rebels had 4 large armies, which won one victory after another. Their first major battle was the 19th March, when a Republican column of 2,000 infantry, 100 cavalry, and some cannon, marching to reinforce Nantes, was ambushed and routed by part of the army of the Centre at Point Charlotte, I don't know. With this victory came thousands of badly needed muskets, as well as ammo, horses, and cannon. On 20th March, the four armies united and named themselves the Grand Catholic Army of the Vendier. The word royal was added later. Towns began to fall. First, Bressuire on 2nd May, Fontaine on 25th May, and the rebels reached Niort in the north. Angers fell on 18th June, and there was a panic in Paris. 7 days earlier, the rebels elected the humble Jacques Cathinet from the Les Piniers Maguis as their commander-in-chief. They unsuccessfully attacked Nantes, but on the second day of the battle, he was mortally wounded, and Diable became their new commander-in-chief. The fighters, also known as whites or brigands, had the habit of returning home after a battle to tend their land. At Waterloo, Napoleon had a total of 60,000 men to fight Wellington's regulators, yet in October 1793, Paris sent an army of 115,000 to fight the rebels in the Vendee Militaire, who were only 60,000 ill-equipped and untrained fighters. The insurgents were supported by 2,000 irregular cavalry and a few cannon, and those with muskets were better shots than any French or British infantryman of the day. I'm not going to get into all the details, but the Republican troops forced the rebels back, and on 12th December they were defeated. On 23rd December, the remnants of the Grand Catholic and Royal Army were annihilated in the woods and marshes of Savigny, where no quarter was given by the Republicans. Over 2,000 rebels managed to escape and find their way back home, only to look with horror on the results of the Infernals. And so the Infernals were... Do they talk about it? It was just horrible what was happening. The atrocities that they did. There is no Vendier. It has perished with its women and children under sword of freedom. Following your orders, I have crushed the children under our horses' hooves and massacred the women. They will bear no more children for those brigands. I have not taken a single prisoner. So that's what was going on there. They were martyred, really, is what happened. And I don't hear anybody ever talking about this. But what they did manage to do was dethrone Napoleon, who was a usurper and who didn't even believe in a proper coronation, and put on the throne one of the Louis, the 18th maybe, the actual Burgundian king, the rightful king. They were able to get him on the throne because they caused such a stir and such an uprising that Napoleon had to take his troops while he was trying to conquer the continent. He had to pull some of his troops out to fight the uprising back home, and it ultimately led to his weakening and everything else. Now, eventually, he did reclaim the throne for a brief period and whatever, but that was what happened. So let's read 1795 to 1799. The Vendians were not deterred, and they conducted such an effective guerrilla campaign that Paris regime finally sued for peace. A treaty was signed on 17th February 1795, but broken by Charette on 24th June. On the following day, the promised help from England arrived, and too little too late due to the persecution of the French aristocratic emigrants. The following year, first Sophillet, then Charette were executed and the war petered out. Religious freedom was still officially denied, and so the war began again on 15th October 1799. Republican villages and towns were seized. Even Nantes fell on 29 October, but the rebels were too weak to hold it. On 9-10th October, Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in a coup d'etat. He had great respect for the Vendier people and called their war Le Combat des Giants. He fully understood that their fight was not a struggle against the revolution, but a fight for the preservation of their liberty and freedom for their religion. Bonaparte immediately began talks with the Vendian religious leader, Abbé Vendier, and set about repairing relations with the Catholic Church. By December, full rights of worship were restored to the church, not only in the Vendier, but in the whole of France, and the church bells rang again. So yeah, because of that, they did eventually side with Napoleon. So they tried to get their rightful king on the throne, the Burgundian. But because whatever, it didn't work out. So they eventually were able to compromise with Napoleon, and they were able to, everything church related was able to be restored, so they backed off. The Concordat, signed on 15th July 1801 between Napoleon Bonaparte and the Pope, made these rights official. In the Concordat, the French government acknowledged Catholicism as the religion of the great majority of the French. In the end, the Venedians won the right to practice their faith. Bonaparte also exempted them from conscription, giving them full indemnity, and assisted the reconstruction of the department. To facilitate the supervision of this reign, the capital was moved from Fontaine to the then very small village of La Roche-sur-Yon. 2 further attempts were made to rekindle the wars, however, neither had validity, were ill-conceived and unsuccessful, with little support from the Vendier. Remembrare. Today, both the right and left of French politics find the Vendée Wars problematic. The idea that any religious faith could be important to people's lives is anathema to the atheists and communists of the left, who cite conscription as the cause and call them civil wars. The right, on the other hand, cite the execution of the king and a desire for the restoration of the monarchy, so refer to the wars as counter-revolutionary wars. Neither acknowledges the well-documented fact that the Vendée Wars were fought by a Christian faith for religious freedom. At the twilight of the pre-revolutionary old regime, questions about what it meant to be a Catholic and why the church mattered often stood at the heart of most political debate in France. Yet the combination of the civil constitution of the clergy, the execution of the king, and the introduction of conscription would not have been sufficient to ignite a popular revolt. However, the effects of the implementation of the ecclesiastical oath and from 3rd March 1793, the closing of churches, combined with the prohibition of public worship, were the sparks that ignited the wars. So that's that. There you have it. And obviously, there's other more secular takes on it. That's why I was trying to find this Mad Monarchist talks about Vendier. He talks about this guy specifically. And he starts it with, among the ranks of royalist counter-revolutionaries in the world, few hold such esteem as the monarchist rebels of the Vendier Uprising. Those who lost their lives are martyrs both for their faith and in a political sense for their sacrifice in the face of the oppression and terrorism of the French Revolution. Their leaders are among the greatest heroes France has ever produced, which is quite a statement by itself. And he gets into talking about this guy who's not well known, Charles Sapinoid. And he gets into the whole thing, but here he talks a lot about Napoleon. Napoleon not wish to waste resources diverting men to suppressing royalists in France. And this is like the colors that I saw, this lighter blue. Lays out peace terms. They cannot have the king back, of course, but he was willing to respect their rights, their freedom of religion, and exempt them from conscription so that they will not be forced to fight for a cause they do not believe in. Sapinoid decided that it would be wiser to come to terms with Napoleon, and he accepts the proposal. I was trying to find... The uprising during the 100 Days is not often remembered. Okay, so Wellington might have been crushed. They're talking about Waterloo. So, at most critical point in his career, Napoleon had to divert troops to deal with the counter-revolutionaries. And had he not done so, if those forces had been present at Waterloo, it is possible that they might have tipped the balance in Napoleon's favor. Wellington might have been crushed earlier in the day, after which Napoleon could have turned and caught the Prussians between himself and Marshal Grouchy. It is speculative, of course, but the last uprising in the Vendier just might have made the difference in the final defeat of Napoleon. In any event, overall, Sapinoid lived happily ever after, When the Bourbon monarchy was restored, he was again rewarded for his loyalty and service by being made a Duke and Père de France. He died in his hometown on August 12th, 1829. So, yeah, it's just a motivating story, right? Like they didn't even have firearms and they were able to fight for their religious freedoms. And so we don't like to think about this because democracy and republics are supposed to be good. We don't like to think about them persecuting, religion, but that's exactly what happened. Because Masonry, the Freemasonic movement, is from Satan himself, and it will always end in violence, no matter how noble the the intentions of those people are. It will always end in violence and destruction. So I guess, I don't know, if you have any other information on what you think this could possibly mean, please let me know. I'm still trying to piece it together, but for now, I wanted to shed light on the Vendier Wars, and point out that maybe they did get their religious freedom, but not their social kingship that they wanted. But maybe in the future that will turn around. And so the more I look into these prophecies and things, the more I know, like, it's not, sure, it's the end of the world, but it's not, we're not going out like this. Like, there will be a triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I do think the social order and government on earth at that time will be a restoration of the monarchy. So that, because that is God's chosen government as far as I'm concerned. So, anyway, let me know what you think. Joan of Arc Media out.